Well, David, we made it to our first milestone. Can you believe it?
Well, milestone is, whoa, why is it on fire?
It's not on fire. It's a celebration. Our podcast is 10 episodes old, silly.
Oh, it's growing up so fast.
I know. Make a wish. Help me blow out the candle.
All right, hang on.
Okay.
Hang on. Okay.
Ready?
Yep. What'd you wish for?
1,000 more episodes.
Oh, that's great.
What did you wish for?
I wish to be the one to eat the cupcake.
Oh, brother. Let's do this. So, how is the cupcake?
Delicious.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Nice. Happy
You
birthday.
Happy
Happy 10 episodes.
10 episodes. You think they can tell that it's a blueberry muffin?
Either that or they were suspicious that it was moldy. But let's hope they think it was a blueberry muffin because it was.
It's blueberry-licious.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got my secret little Jiffy muffin recipe.
Yeah. Well, we threatened on episode 1 that we were going to do some things in the kitchen. We haven't done that yet. We need to work on that.
Yep.
We'll add it in. So show and tell for this week. I wanted to start with a video that we took at a customer's house. I did not build this waterfall, but we have worked on it several times, just cleaning it up, winterizing it, open it back up for the spring, that kind of thing. But with the red bud there, and it's a long waterfall. Whoever built it did a nice job. It's fun. So it's
beautiful.
Cool that we get to do stuff like that. And then our next picture, this is one of my favorite scenes to drive past every spring. The Yoshino cherries and the red buds bloom at about the same time. And this is an entrance to a neighborhood that has a very pointed sign that says no trespassing.
Yeah, we just sit there in front of the sign. No trespassing.
Yeah, we pulled in.
Is photography trespassing? I don't think so.
Photographers get away with a lot. You just kind of, that's definitely a ask for permission later if you have to kind of thing.
Yeah.
But a lot of tulips are blooming now. We don't actually get a ton of tulips in the South because they need a little bit harsher winter, but the ones that are blooming are pretty. And we saw lots of different types of daffodils this week.
Yeah, beautiful.
Several of these are from our son John's garden.
Oh, we forgot to take a picture of the one that was the most ruffled. Was that the one, or did you get one of those?
No, I got one of those.
Okay.
It should be in this grouping. I call it scrambled egg daffodil. I think it's cool. And then let's see, after that, I think we have some early perennials, Virginia bluebells, and then there's another picture of the bluebells with some yellow flower in front. It kind of almost looks like a different type of daffodil, but I don't know what family it's in. But those are pretty. And then the crab apples were blooming this week.
They've been so pretty.
It's fun to see the layers and the different, things come and things go, and sometimes pretty fast. But the crab apples are beautiful. There's a picture here of a tulip magnolia, Yoshino cherry, and a red bud all together. And I wish it showed up better in the cell phone photo that I took, but it is cool just to see all the colors in one place at the same time.
It's so pretty.
Yeah. Actually, I'm not sure that I described that accurately, but it's 3 different trees that are looking really great at the same time.
What did you say they were?
Well, what they really are is a tulip magnolia and a red bud and a Japanese maple.
Got it.
So that's what's important. Is
what they are is
what
gorgeous.
They really are. Yeah. And we took pictures of patio peach, I think, last week, and we were back at the same customer's house in time to see the blossoms transitioning into a real pretty burgundy leaf. And so that's fun too. Mm-hmm. And we like to go to the movies, so we go a lot. This is our local movie theater, and well, I'm sure if you've heard any of our episodes, you've probably heard us talk about the movies that we like to go see and review.
Do you think we've mentioned that we go to the movies?
We do. We go to the movies. We have movie reviews on our channel on YouTube. If you haven't seen them, you should check them out. This is our local theater, and in the atrium of the theater are Yoshino cherry trees that are blooming right now. They're kind of finishing, but this last week they were amazing, and they're the most beautiful at night against the black sky. So the photos don't really do it justice, but
right.
It's amazing, and I had to try. So
I know people think we're weird when they come out of the theater, and I'm just standing there just staring up into the sky
with your mouth open.
Yeah. You know what? I always say it's my responsibility to enjoy these flowers because they're so short-lived.
Yeah, it's
really just
going
to be for a few weeks in the spring, maybe what, three weeks if you're lucky.
Maybe.
And we're not going to, how many, I mean, I don't know. I'm not going to tell you how many times we go in 3 weeks, but it's not every day.
No.
And I just want to enjoy them. It is breathtaking to see them lit up against that dark nighttime sky. It's just so gorgeous.
Well, and we planted a Yoshino cherry in our front yard a couple of years back, and it's beautiful, but it had just hit its peak, and then we had a really hard thunderstorm, and it knocked most of the petals off. So, and now we're just on to turning green, which it's still a beautiful tree in the summer, but that was a little disappointing.
I know.
But you can't, what
it's
do you
so
do?
gorgeous.
Yeah.
We really do on purpose stop and try to enjoy beautiful things.
We do.
Because
it should be obvious.
Yeah.
How much we talk about it on the podcast.
Well, I don't know, but I just think, it's something you should do.
Yeah.
Because they're so beautiful, and usually things that are that beautiful are short-lived. It just seems like you gotta take advantage of it when it's there.
God's creation, and even if they're hybrids that man has helped to develop, he had to have something to start with, and God created whatever man started with. So
yeah, yep.
God's beauty. Well, we're coming up on the Easter season, and there have been a couple movies dealing with the Last Supper. And then our pastor talked about it some at church this past Sunday, and you were super interested. I think you wanted to kind of talk about what that would have really looked like compared maybe to the famous Da Vinci painting.
Right. And in the description, we're going to put a link to last Sunday's message because it was so good. Pastor did such a great job. And I went ahead and looked up a picture of the table. Of course, the most famous painting of the Last Supper is the Da Vinci painting. Yeah. And it's totally wrong. But
right.
But even in we reviewed the movie The Last Supper, not by The Chosen, but then we also went to see The Chosen, episodes 1 and 2. We've already seen those.
Yep. We'll be reviewing those too.
They got the table a little closer. It was lower to the ground, but they're still sitting at the table.
Yeah.
But we've learned from some of our lessons that the Last Supper really probably would have been at a table. I'm going to show you a picture here. I think it's called a Triclinium table, and it's a Roman-style table that's usually it's on 3 sides. So the guests would lay on their left side, facing the inside, leaving their right hand free to eat the meal, and they would all recline at this it's like a U-shaped table.
Yeah.
The inside was left open. The middle was for like people to come and serve or for entertainment. And I just thought I was so proud of my pastor that he did a message on this table and he got it culturally correct. But I thought it was really interesting. He took it a step farther. I'd never heard anybody talk about where people might have been sitting at the table. And I thought it was so fascinating.
The specific seats.
Right. So if you see, I'm going to pull up that photo again. If you look at the photo at the far left, the second seat from the left is where the host would sit. So they think that is where Jesus would have been sitting in this U-shaped configuration. And then from there in scripture, we kind of have a few clues as to where everybody else might have been sitting.
Right.
John 13:23 indicates that John was probably sitting to Jesus's right, because it says that he could lean back on Jesus. So
Yeah.
Jesus would have had to have been to his left as far as the way that they were reclining.
I just have to say, I think it would be really hard to eat laying down,
Yeah.
especially at my age. I don't think that's going to work very well.
I mean, we're pretty good at eating around a coffee table, which is about as close as you're going to get, maybe.
I'm still sitting upright while I do that.
Right.
They're, reclining like this, I guess, and eating, laying back away from the table. It just,
I feel like my elbow would fall asleep.
I feel like whoever came up with that, it was a horrible idea.
Maybe it was very luxurious.
But I'm not knocking the Bible. I'm just saying, if that's what they did at the time, it's accurate, but it sounds completely uncomfortable to me.
Well, and I didn't really even say that it was Jewish. I said it was a Roman style table, but that was a lot of the culture in that area.
Well, they didn't own, they needed a place to do this.
That's
and
true.
They used someone else's space,
It was
whether
someone
it was
else's upper room. Yes.
a home or, a room that they rented, or however exactly it happened. It didn't belong to them.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it may have been someone who was Roman or had Roman inclinations.
So Matthew 26:23 indicates that Judas was seated to the left of Christ. They think that's true because they both would dipped into the same bowl, and so Judas would have had to have been fairly close to him.
Yeah.
And then they think that Peter was probably across from John, because he had to kind of motion to him and to ask him, say, ask Jesus who he's talking about.
Yeah.
And so they think he was probably across the table. And that would have been Peter would have been in the seat of the servant.
Yeah.
And that was super interesting. If you listen to the message from Sunday, I thought Pastor had a lot of neat things to say about that.
Right.
But one of the points that really stuck with me is that if Judas was directly to Jesus's left on that third seat, that third position, that was where the guest of honor would sit. And we talked about this a lot. A lot of times we think about that verse that says, love your enemy. And I don't think it means as much all the time, because you and I don't talk like that. We don't say, oh, you know who my enemy is. We don't really use that word a lot. But Pastor made the point to say, Jesus knew that Judas was going to betray him. And he still showed that he was loving his enemy by setting him in that place of honor. And he said, what would that look like to show honor and love to your betrayer?
Yeah.
And we talked about that, how that word, if you ask somebody, hey, who's your enemy? I think a lot of people wouldn't be able to say, oh, well, my number one enemy is, but if you ask somebody, hey, has anybody ever betrayed you? I don't know anybody that couldn't think of probably somebody.
Yeah.
And so that
hard.
just made it hit home for me. That was really, really, really well done.
It was. It was. And we know obviously that Judas betrayed Jesus. And so that's not a leap to say it that way.
Yeah.
To love your betrayer.
Yeah.
And, that's a hard thing.
So anyway, that was just fascinating for me. I love the culture of it. And I thought it was very fitting. Like I said, we'll put that link in the description of this video if you want to check out Pastor Darren saying it even better than I just did.
Well, it's a good message, and he's a really good communicator. And so if you're interested at all, I recommend it. It will not be a waste of your time. I promise.
Good stuff.
Well, this week we're going to, kind of have, we're going to decide what to name this episode after we finish filming it. So I thought about the potpourri episode or the miscellaneous episode. I'm not really sure what we're going to call it, but
happy 10th episode.
Happy 10th episode. Maybe it'll just be that. I don't know yet. But we had a couple things the last two episodes that we didn't get to that we wanted to kind of include here. And then, of course, we did, something from this week's message at our church. Hillary said that maybe this week we would talk about dinosaurs. And so I thought, there's so many things you can talk about dinosaurs. I'm sure we'll circle back eventually and talk about them more, but I didn't want to not do it at all. So, this is some information that I got from Answers in Genesis, one of the sites that we talked about last week, and we've put a link to them in last week's show description. We'll try to do that again this week. But that was the first place that I heard about, we start this way. Dinosaurs, we believe, because we believe dinosaurs are real, is pretty obvious with all the fossils that they have to be real. They were created on day 6 with the other land animals and with man, because that's what the Bible says. And if they're real, which they are, and then if God created everything, which we believe he did, then he had to create them. And what makes sense is that he created them on day 6. So the question is, if it is a young earth and dinosaurs were created at the same time, even on the same day as man, which evolutionists will tell you is not really true, then it brings up a lot of questions. And one of those is, how could dinosaurs have been on the ark? Well, the ark that Noah built in the great flood that covered the earth about 4,500 years ago. Now that, again, could be a whole nother series of podcasts, the flood of Noah, but we believe that that's a real thing. So people sometimes bring up, well, there are thousands of distinct dinosaurs. So how could all those dinosaurs fit on the ark? Because, well, let me read it to you really quick. What we're going to look at is Genesis chapter 7, verses 14 and 15, which say, they had with them every wild animal according to its kind, all livestock according to their kinds, every creature that moves along the ground according to its kind, and every bird according to its kind, everything with wings. Pairs of all creatures that have the breath of life in them came to Noah and entered the ark. So at another place, it talks about there were 2 of every animal and 7 of some, because they were going to need more for sacrifices at some point. So if there were 2 of every animal and there are thousands of distinct dinosaurs, then how in the world could all those dinosaurs fit on the ark? And how could really all the animals fit on the ark? Mm-hmm. But the explanation that Answers in Genesis gives is that when the Bible says 2 of every kind, quote unquote kind, they think that correlates to the scientific classification of family. I remember in junior high in science class, we had to memorize the different categories of animals. There was class, phyla, family. I don't remember them all now, and I certainly don't remember them in order, but family is one of those. And so creation scientists believe that when the Bible says kind, that's kind of even with the scientific classification of family. Well, there are only about 50 families of dinosaurs. And so if you have 2 of each of those, that's only about 100 dinosaurs. And
that seems more reasonable.
It seems a lot more reasonable. But when we went to the life-size ark replica that the people in Answers in Genesis had constructed, which is in Kentucky, which is not super far from here. We went there a couple summers ago and checked it out. And I mean, it's massive. If you haven't had a chance to see it, you should put that on your list for vacation or whatever you want to call it, and go see it, tour it, go through it. It's fascinating, the size, the magnitude of it, as well as just all the information that's in there about how they could have handled feeding all these animals and just dealing with all the things. I mean, they've gone to an amazing amount of work and thought. And it's not just the people at Answers in Genesis, but they're using information from a lot of different people. So what they discovered when they really studied this and when they mapped it out and said, well, the Bible tells us how big the ark was. So when you build that, and when you think of the families, the family level of classification of all the animals, in other words, there are lots of different kinds of dogs, but you just need 2 dogs. Because DNA wise, if you have 2 of the right kind of dogs, maybe not a highly hybridized dog, but if you have 2 from the kind of the original dog family, there's DNA in there that you can get all the different dogs. You can get Rottweilers and what are the popular dogs now? The
Golden
Doodles, and you can get all of those from 2 dogs. That's proven scientifically, which is crazy. And so then if you add in about 100 dinosaurs, and the other thing that a lot of people don't realize is, there are some really huge dinosaurs, but the average dinosaur was kind of in the range of between a sheep and a bison. And you think, well, if you went and stood by a bison's pretty big. But compared to Diplodocus or one of those sauropods that are just amazingly huge, they're not that big. And if you go see the ark and are completely blown away by the size of it, which you probably will be, which we were.
That was actually one of my most favorite parts, was seriously just standing there in the parking lot and taking in the scope of it.
Yeah.
It puts it in such perspective.
You can fit an awful lot of bison in there. So to be able to fit approximately 100 dinosaurs between the size of a sheep and a bison is very reasonable. And then the really big ones, probably they brought in babies or, juveniles that would have been much smaller.
Yeah.
I don't know that anyone's been able to prove this. I don't know how you would prove it, but the theory is that dinosaurs continued to grow their entire lives, and that's how some of them got to be so large, but that they started out at a reasonable size. A baby elephant is huge compared to a baby human, but it's small compared to an adult elephant.
Mm-hmm.
So same thing with dinosaurs. So if you only had 100 dinosaurs and some of the big ones were juveniles, then you could make everything fit.
And if you think about it also, this was God's project. He orchestrated this.
Right.
He told Noah that he would bring the animals to him. And so you've got to imagine that if he wants this all to survive, he can keep all of these animals alive. And I'm sure Noah had a lot of work to do, but yeah, he can make sure, because I'm thinking, oh, well, what if one of those dinosaurs died and they didn't have them made? But again, this was a God project.
Well, most of them did get extinct eventually.
Yes. And not just dinosaurs. A lot of animals have gone extinct.
The dodo bird, and there are all kinds of animals that have been extinct, sadly.
Yeah.
But we believe that they made it through the flood, at least one pair of each kind.
Mm-hmm. Well, and again, we could talk about this more later, but there's so many cultures around the world that have dragon stories that I think people for the long time just thought, oh, well, those are just myths. Those are just legends. But probably those were types of dinosaurs that survived and that people battled against. So it's very fascinating to think about.
Well, and also the idea that a dragon would breathe fire seems super far-fetched, and maybe it never happened. That could be an exaggeration. But there is a beetle that can literally make fire.
Yeah. It has 2 chambers and I think it's a like a protection mechanism.
Yeah. So there are all kinds of things that are possible.
So can I circle back to something we said last week?
Yes. Only if you let me have a swig of your water, please. Okay. Because
little cupcake stuck there.
Eating a cupcake with no water was not the best plan.
That's right. Little blueberry muffin problems. So last week we were talking about the flood, and we mentioned how the Lord had said, it's in Genesis 6:3. It says, "Then the Lord said, my spirit will not contend with humans forever, for they are mortal. Their days will be 120 years. And we were kind of discussing and debating whether that meant that, because I think some people have said, well, that's when God said our lifespans would be shorter. They would only go to 120. No one would live past that. And I said, well, let's look that up. We'll do a little research. And actually, the people that I researched agreed that that was actually probably the time between when he declared that their days are limited, and from the time he declared it until the time of the flood, that was the 120-year span.
Okay.
Because actually, once they get off the flood, once they get off the ark, then there's more genealogies that tell us how long people lived. And I think it was through the line of Shem. His descendants lived 438 years, 433 years, 464 years. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Still
It's a long time.
after that. Now, I will say it was maybe 4 generations in. Now it was down to like 239, then 237, then 230, and then right away now it goes back down to like in the hundreds. So something was happening right after the flood that not long after, people weren't living hundreds and hundreds of years. But it seemed like by the time we got to Abraham now, he lived to be 175. So still long for us, but certainly not the 500, 600, 800 years that people were living before the flood. So
yeah. Well, I've heard it preached the other way, and I'm not going to argue because I haven't researched it as much as you have. But in and I spent a long time talking about the book by Jack Quozo on one of our recent episodes about that man really did live 700, 800, 900 plus years.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all true. But at some point, the lifespan's got a lot shorter. And in recent history, for anybody to live 100 years is pretty extreme. But there have been a few people in the last 100, 150 years that were documented as getting pretty close to 120 years.
Mm-hmm.
So, but not 130 or 150. And so, that's where it kind of made sense to me, where it says their days will be numbered. But I understand what you're saying. And, I can see that you studied it more than I did.
Well, as a side note, I don't know if we've talked about this a lot, but I'm actually kind of fascinated with the genealogies. I love looking through them. I know that sounds kind of boring, but one day it kind of hit me at that. If the Bible is true and the flood really happened, then every single one of us can know for sure that one of our grandpas was Noah. And any person you meet in the grocery store, at the gas station, across the world, anywhere, you can look at them and just say, "Oh, hey, we have an ancestor in common."
Yeah.
You remember Grandpa Noah, and still also Adam. If
Right.
everyone came from our great grandma and grandpa, then every person you meet is a cousin.
Yeah.
And you've got Grandpa Noah in common. You've got Grandpa Adam in common. And I just always think that's so fascinating because I do believe that the Bible is true. I do believe that it can be trusted, and we are all family.
Yeah.
So,
well, we'll have to put that on our list for future podcasts, but it's been scientifically proven as well. And I may have even mentioned this in one of our other episodes, but that two people with kind of medium complexions, not super dark, not super light, could have the full DNA for all of the ethnicities, all the skin tones. And that, to say that we all came from Adam and Eve, and then after the flood from Noah and his family, who were descendants of Adam and Eve, it's possible. That DNA is capable of doing that, which is fascinating. So, I wanted to move on to something that I've been trying to get to the last couple episodes, and we keep running out of time. And what we've talked about is that creationism, there's more and more scientific evidence to back up the biblical account, but at some point you still need faith to believe, because there's no, as we mentioned, there's no actual video evidence of what happened. No one was there to record it in a way that would be acceptable by today's standards, other than the writings in the Bible, which we believe are true and are God's eyewitness accounts. But to prove it beyond any doubt, there has to be faith. There also has to be faith for Darwinian evolution. If you subscribe to that and you think the biblical creation account is, that can't be true, you're still using faith, because there are no absolute proofs for Darwinian evolution. There are a lot of gaps and a lot of theories that can't really be proven. And so you're using faith either way. What I thought was interesting is I had heard of this, and I looked on the internet and found it on the Discovery Institute's website. I found what's called a scientific dissent from Darwinism. And what this is a document, and the document, other than the signatures, which there are a lot of signatures, what it says is really pretty short and straightforward. And it's right here, I'll read it. Quote, "We are skeptical of the ability of random mutation and natural selection to account for the complexity of life. Careful examination of the evidence for Darwinian theory should be encouraged." End quote. That's it. That's the document. It doesn't say Darwinian evolution is absolutely false. It doesn't say there is a God. It doesn't say the biblical account of creation is the only way that a reasonable person would consider the earth to have been formed. It doesn't say any of that. It just says we're skeptical of the ability of random mutation, which is Darwinian evolution, and natural selection to account for the complexity of life. Careful examination of the evidence for Darwinian theory should be encouraged. And so a lot of people have put their signatures to this, and as of May 2021, there are over 1,100 signatures, which there are a lot more credentialed, quote, experts in scientific fields than that, but still 1,100 people is a lot of people. And several of these people are not Christians. They're just scientists who have looked at the evidence and said, I don't know, we're kind of saying this is a fact, but it doesn't really read like a fact if you're honestly considering all of the information and the shortcomings therein. Not all of these people are PhDs, but over 50% of them are. Some of them are heads of departments at universities and they're all credentialed people who have some sort of standing in either medical or scientific areas. And we've also heard that signing this document can be a career death sentence. That if once you do that, there are certain places that don't want you. You can't work for them anymore. And so, it's kind of a brave thing. You should have seen 3 pages of this. The first page, I think it's 28 pages. And then I just put one in the middle just to show. It's a lot of people that have signed this. And so that's maybe not a scientific fact, but a lot of really smart people who are trying to find the truth are saying and being willing to go on record with the belief that Darwinian evolution is kind of coming up a little short. And at the very least, we need to be really careful and really critical about studying it to see what's really there.
Yeah, I'm so proud of them for going out on a limb and being willing to sign it. And like you said, they're not saying, oh, I know this is true or I reject this. They're just saying, hey guys, we're scientists. We should examine things, kind of like we said in the beginning with just be willing to search for the truth. If the Bible is true and Jesus is truth, then you shouldn't ever be afraid to look for truth.
Yeah.
Because because it's going to be whatever he said. I just truly believe that. You know, it's unsettling to me that some evolution scientists have basically said, I don't care what you show me. I will stick to this. I will believe this. It's like they're holding that belief, that faith higher, of course, higher than God's word, and refusing to acknowledge that, you know, sometimes theories prove to be incorrect.
It's a religion at that point.
Well, I mean, anything can be.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think let's be honest about it. Let's just be honest and say,
Well, we said we love science, but,
yeah,
you know, if you get a different result than what you thought, I mean, maybe it needs to be done multiple times. Maybe you need to have somebody else look at the data. But be honest about what it says. If you get a different result than you expect, then try to find out why and just pursue it honestly and be willing to accept.
yeah,
You know, that's the big thing these days, right? Trust the science. Well, trust the science, even if it doesn't tell you what you think it should tell you.
yeah. Yeah, you know, scientists can be heroes, just like athletes or astronauts, but they shouldn't be viewed as infallible.
Right.
You know, I mean, really, besides God, who could possibly be infallible? Nobody.
Yeah, nobody.
So
Nobody, but you can have an idol. You can have a false god. And sometimes science is treated like a god, or scientists are treated like gods or heroes. And I mean, I think it's fine for a scientist to be a hero, just like an athlete or whatever, but
yeah,
but they're not infallible, like you said. And yeah, well, I kind of want to go into a whole nother thing, but we're going to cover that in some upcoming episodes. Nobody's all good or all bad.
Yeah.
So just be honest about it.
yeah,
But look, if there is an all-powerful God who really created the planets, the stars, water, land, oxygen, birds, fish, land animals, humans, and he created all of them ex nihilo, out of nothing. And he did it in 6 24-hour periods, which we believe is what the Bible teaches, and that there is scientific evidence to back that up, or at least to show that it could be possible. If that's really true, and if the more you study it, you're starting to see, oh my gosh, yeah, that seems like it's really true, then how do you not fall on your face and worship that God? I mean, think about it. I just rattled off a bunch of stuff, but take some time this week and really think about that. Like if all the complexities of the human body that doctors still don't know, you know, they study and they kind of learn and say, oh, well, the eye works like this happens and this happens, but they still don't know how it actually happens. You know, they can even break it down, the rods and the cones and all the things, and it like flips the image, and that, you know, it's fascinating, but they still don't know why it does it or how it does it. God created all of that in just the eye, and how your kidneys work and your heart. And I mean, nobody knows how all that stuff really works. And he did all of it in one day. That's why science wants to say, well, it was millions and millions of years, because it takes the God out of it. Give me millions of years, then anything could happen. And that's the lie from Satan, that he wants to take the holiness and the awe and the amazing capabilities of an all-powerful God out of the equation. But when you think about that, one all-powerful being made all of that, and he did it in such a short period of time, then how do you not worship him? So I think people who don't believe in God, there's different reasons. And some of those reasons might be that they're not willing to change their paradigm. They didn't believe there was a God, and they're just not willing to really consider it well enough to see what the facts are really telling them. Maybe they have other gods, like science, that they don't want to give up. They have an incorrect idea of who God is. That could be a super long conversation that we'll have another time. But I think I think God is amazing, but there are a lot of different ideas of who God is, and a lot of people have the wrong ideas. And so then they go, oh, well, I don't want to believe in God, because if there's a God and he allows cancer, then I can't believe in him. And, we're not going to get into that in this episode, but wrong ideas about God is the reason why some people don't believe. And then, sometimes super smart people just don't want to believe that there's somebody smarter than them or more powerful than them.
You have to be willing to humble yourself.
Sometimes surgeons and professors and super smart people, they start to think of themselves as a god. Mm-hmm. And they want other people to think of them as a god, and they can't believe in a God that's all powerful, because then that demotes them and takes away their power and takes away their ranking and, their honor. And so, that's sad, but we believe in the one true God who created the heavens and the earth in 6 24-hour periods. And there's scientific evidence to back up that it's at least possible. You should check it out.
Well, and I like God's story better.
Yeah.
I like his story because in his story, he speaks everything into existence, but then when he gets ready to make man, he gets in the dirt with his own hands. He forms him. He breathes life into him with his own breath.
Yeah.
And he loves us. The whole Bible is this long love story, and God is trying to reveal himself to us. It's the opposite of evolution. Evolution is years and years and years of death and destruction and decay, and then somehow we accidentally show up. That is not the story that my dad has written and told me. And so I just say, pick the better story, the one where you are loved, where you are intentional, where you have a purpose, where your dad loves you. Don't buy the lie on that other story. It's just not a good story. It's just not.
I agree.
Okay.
I agree. Well, there it is. That's our miscellaneous potpourri 10th anniversary, 10th episode.
We did it.
And for better or worse, we're having fun. We hope that you're having fun. We know your time is valuable, and we thank you for sharing it with us. So we'll be back next week. And until then, we're David and Hillary. Thanks for joining us.
See ya.